Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running a record label. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you for people who have been coming to our website, otherrecordlabels.com, and downloading the free resources that we have there. It's been so exciting to connect with a lot of you. I'm getting some DMs and some emails. If you need some help with your label, some tools for you, visit otherrecordlabels.com to get those. Today is one of those episodes that I call Industry Insiders. So basically, don't talk to a label per se, but we talk to someone in the industry. Today is such a good episode. Trust me, you got to go through this one from the beginning to the end. I talk with Jamie Coletta, who is a music publicist. And so today's topic is all about music publicity. Jamie owns a company called No Earbuds. She's a music publicist and she works on some great campaigns. And this is a really great episode. There is so much we talk about in here. And I know a lot of us have questions, especially as DIY artists or small indie labels. When it comes to music publicity, we ask questions like, when should we hire a music publicist? How do we know if we've reached that point where it's now time to hand over the baton to someone else to take care of publicity? How do we know if we can afford to spend that money? How do you find a music publicist? How do you measure your ROI when you've hired a music publicist? These are all questions we get into in this interview. I think you're going to love it. But listen, before we get into it, I want to tell you something. Stay tuned to the very end. We have a special announcement that pertains to you and the podcast and other record labels, as well as Jamie. So please enjoy this interview. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's so great to chat with you, and I admire your work. And I've been following you now for a couple of, probably close to a year, and I've seen the artists that you're working, and I see them get huge coverage. So it's looking like this has been a really great year for you.
Yeah, thank you. It feels great. I don't know. I think I try not to ever get too like, oh, wow, a lot of cool shit's happening for them. I try not to get too in my head for it because then I'll stop kind of pushing. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, everybody's doing great. I don't know what it is. That maybe it's just the time right now. Maybe it's the fact that I've been at this for so long
Sure.
And people are finally listening to me. Like, I don't know. I'm just grateful, and I'm going to keep acting like nobody's listening to my band so that I keep finding new people.
Well, that's funny. Like, can you get better at this job, or does every new record start back at zero?
No, you can get better. I don't think I started zero at any. I mean, I think the only times you really start at zero, and that's really not the right way to say it, but the only times you really kind of start from scratch is when it's like a brand new project. Like, never released anything, really baby and I almost never work with stuff that starts from zero, I'm usually coming in at like, they're just getting off the ground. They got a few like DIY kind of things under their belt and they're ready to step up. That's usually when I step in.
Okay.
But, it's not to say I haven't worked projects like that, where it's starting from zero. It's a much harder job to do. But I don't think that I think the skill set, it just develops with each release I work on. It's always a different approach with every release, but it's like the same ideas and the same skills are what are applied to each thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And you gain contacts, and those contacts, I imagine. So you win, if you win over a contact for one record, then if the next artist or the next record you're working, does that increase the chances that journalist might pay attention to you?
It increases the chances that they'll answer my email or they'll at least read it, but it doesn't change. Like, at the end of the day, they're just like me, where it's like, it's got to be about the music. So if they don't respond to the music, it doesn't matter if they, if I've got a better relationship with them. I tend to not use my relationships to just like convince people to cover stuff. I want to make sure that people are fans, I really do. So, I think it helps just in the sense of they open my emails more than other people. So
yeah, well,
that's always a step.
And that's right. And I mean, there's a lot of great music that just doesn't get heard. So it's not even a question of is it subjective or do you have the right context? Sometimes it just doesn't get heard.
Getting them to open, even not even an answer, but even just getting them to look in their massive inbox and recognize your name.
I know.
That takes time. That takes so many failed pitches. It's crazy, you know, like,
right.
you know, there's people I'm working with now on some of my upcoming releases that I've been pitching for probably close to 5-10 years, you know, like I've been in different, you know, they've been at different outlets and I've been trying so hard over the years to get them to bite on my stuff and they just don't see me, you know?
Yeah.
So that happens, that, you know, if that's something that's going to probably continue through my career as I keep trying, you know, there's a whole group of writers out there that I aspire to have relationships with and try to work with and get them music because I know they'd like what I'm doing, but they just don't see me, you know, and it's frustrating, but I think that's just part of the gig. You know, you got to just kind of keep hustling and finding your ways in and just be genuine and, you know, what else can you
It's still pretty encouraging though to hear that there are parts of the business that's still subjective and that's still dependent on good music.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, that's like my ethos, you know, like I really, really, really won't work on something if I don't love it.
Yeah.
Or if I have to like it, you know what I mean? Like I have to at least be able to say like, yeah, I want to listen to this song.
Sure.
You know, like
sure.
That, at the bare minimum, I've got to want to listen to it on my own. It can't be like, oh, I'm working this record, I have to listen to it. Like, nah, that ain't it. So I think, you know, there's definitely people like me out there, but even with writers, a lot of times, you know, sure, they have to cover the big stuff, but the majority of people I work with on a regular basis aren't like that.
Right.
They're very like, I like this, I'll write about it. If I don't like this, I won't. You know, like
and that's good.
I never end up in the situation where I have a writer cover something for me who hates it and then pans it. Like that just doesn't happen. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's good too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm pushy, you know, I can be pushy about a release and think, no, I have to get this review. I have to get this, you know, and then they do it and then they trash it. It's like, what's the point of that? It doesn't matter if you have all the sexy press looks in the world if they don't like it.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
no, that's
good.
true. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Tell me here, what is music publicity? Has this title evolved? Like basically, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I will start it by saying that if you got another publicist on this podcast, you would probably get a completely different answer. Because I don't, you know, I think for the broad strokes purposes of explaining what I do, that covers it. But I think, you know, what I've tried to create with my business and with the way I operate with my bands is completely different from what people expect from PR.
Okay.
To me, I don't think you can say that you're working a proper PR campaign if you're not factoring in every element of promotion that's available to you today, which includes social media and streaming and all of these other, you know, avenues that beyond just sending out press releases and getting blogs to cover your stuff, you know, how am I actually creating a conversation around this artist or around the release? That's always my first question. I don't care if I get the Pitchfork review or if I get, you know, some viral moment on the Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's all PR to me. You know, like that's all part of it. So it's really taking all the years of experience that I have and then looking at a band and taking their goals into mind and then, you know, building a strategy around that to, you know, create more awareness about them. I think that's what PR should be. And it doesn't really matter if it's a premiere or if it, you know, all the technical aspects of traditional PR are still a part of it. But I think, you know, it's important to factor in these other things too, because a prominent writer with 50,000 Twitter followers tweeting, I love this song, is 10 times more valuable than them writing a fucking like 1,200 page essay, you know, 1,200 word essay about the artist.
That's so genius.
But you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to say no to either thing. You want to make sure all of it is kind of, it's all the writing part and the traditional part is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. Like, you can't just get the review and be like, why aren't we popping off? Like, what's up? Why is nobody talking about our band? Well, because you got one review on one website and you posted about it once.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I always tell people to look at if in doubt, examine the way that you use social media and examine the way that you use, you know, and discover music. And when you start practicing a little bit more self-awareness, you're going to start picking up on things that you do that you should implement into your strategies, you know? So that's sort of what, you know, Earbuds and what I do is it's PR sort of, but I purposely I never gave it a proper definition, and I never will, because I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it could be anything at any time, and it's constantly evolving. And at the end of the day, all I care about is that people are talking about my artist. That's it. My job, I've done what I have to do.
Man,
but I said,
that's so genius. And I wanted to ask you because there are so many ways you can get press coverage. There's traditional media like newspapers, which I've got there's a newspaper in Montreal who's supportive of my label, and we've had, traditional printed, which has done well. Then there's playlisting, which is sexy right now, and then there's indie blogs, which has cred. And you kind of answered my question, but like, do you prefer one type of coverage over another, or is it all just compounding into one big strategy?
I don't know if it's completely dependent on the release, right? Like, I have a band I'm working right now that is like, they really made themselves on Twitter. Like they were really able to kind of identify an audience and like a brand for themselves on Twitter. So for them, having big, supportive tweets happening and having a lot of people tweeting about the record, it probably means a little bit more than the other stuff, like just because that's sort of where their people are. But I think it's case dependent, because there's some type of bands where like all the traditional press kind of lining up to support them, that's going to be meaningful. That's what's going to matter. It's just like everybody's kind of you've got to really look at, that's the thing too with this game, is you can't, no two things are going to be the same. And if you approach them that way, that's when you fail, you know, like you got to treat each one like it's its own special beast. And every single one is going to have different strategy points and goals that mean more than other things. There's bands, plenty of like pop punk and like emo bands. It's like, they don't need fucking traditional press, there's that it's cool. Yes, we'll get it, but it's like, that should not be the end game, because that's definitely not what they need to grow.
That's a good point.
It's sometimes genre dependent, but it's a lot of times just case by case. And it's sitting down at the very beginning and saying, well, where do we want to be in 5 years? What's the end game here? What is our goal?
Right.
And once you sort of know where you want to head, it's easier to plot what's important between then and now,
I love what you said about, the using your own behaviors as a way to kind of determine what your strategy can be. And that's so funny, because you can't argue with yourself. So if an artist is like, oh, no, I want Pitchfork, that's all I want. But it's like, well, how many records have you discovered on Pitchfork recently, versus a tweet, and it's so funny you talked about that writer thing, because there's a couple writers I can think of right now who I follow on Twitter, and they say something about an upcoming record. I remember when the Low record came out a couple years ago on Sub Pop, and there was a few journalists who had it a couple months early, and who I was following, and they were tweeting about it. And they were saying like, get ready, everybody, because this is going to, blow your socks off. And I just remember like, that's where I discovered it. That way more than, like you said, in whatever publication they're writing for. That's so crazy. I never even thought of that. So good.
You really have to think like the in that scenario you gave, it's like, yes, you've never discovered a record on Pitchfork. It still has its value.
Of course, sure.
Strategically as a label and like somebody at the helm of a team, it still has its value and you still want it.
100%.
But it's not to get it through your artist's minds that it's like, it's just one piece to your bigger picture. It's just one thing. It's not, you're not going to get that and everything's going to change. That's not how it works.
Right.
You might get some new attention. Sure. Like you'll get some new people paying attention for sure. There always is. But it's not this like, if you think about your own behaviors, you'll realize I never look, if you're somebody who says, no, I always look at Pitchfork, that's where I find all my new music. Well, then, let's get you on Pitchfork. You just got to kind of examine how you operate. And I think it's more just like a challenge for bands and for teams to think that way, right? Like instead of thinking, I need this checklist of stuff that I've been told is what I need to get for my band to be successful. Instead of going that route, it's saying, fuck that. And let's look at how you use the internet and how you find new music. And let's do a campaign like that. Let's build something for real usage, because for me, I find, my personal experience, I find I need to see the name of a band 2, 3, 4 times.
Agreed.
Before I'm like, okay, fine.
Yes.
So if you're just getting one, traditional blog write-up or review, I might see that, but that's one time.
Yes, I know.
I might see it once and I'll be like, okay, word. But I need to see that once from the blog. I need to see it once from a friend that I really like their taste in music. I need to see it once from, I don't know, like a little video clip or something.
Sure.
I need to see multiple different types of things happening before I stop and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I've seen this 4 times in the last week. Let me listen.
It feels like fate.
Yeah, and we're pickier listeners for sure, but like the average listener isn't going through all of those steps, but the average listener probably does need, especially with the how frequent and how fast social media moves and how much is going on there.
Yes.
A regular person definitely needs to see something a couple times. They really do, because it's going to be out of their feed in 2 seconds. So
let me ask you a question. Then we're talking about social media, and this is like a yucky question, but what about influencers? Has there ever been a time? Have you thought at all about? There's this Instagram person and their lifestyle blog or their lifestyle feed would suit this music, or this music suits their lifestyle. Maybe I'll reach out to them. Like, has that ever crossed your mind, or even talking to someone who just tweets a lot about music?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how to answer this question. I want to make sure I answer it in a way that doesn't make me sound like I actually give a shit about influencers. There are people, I think the term has gotten kind of a connotation to it.
Totally.
That people they think it's like,
I couldn't think of a better one.
In like, like you think of like diet shakes and shit. Like, it's
yoga.
That's not what we're talking about. I think there's, when we're talking about influencers, there are definitely people who I know and I reach out to that are not people who really do anything in music. They're just people who are online and they're always talking about music and people pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I definitely want them to know what I'm working on,
Sure.
But it's, and in the past, I've definitely worked with artists in other jobs that, influencer campaigns were like a push, and it was like, get this person to hold up the record. And it's just like, that shit don't work. Like,
well, I think a less cringeworthy example would be, there's an Instagram account that I follow that posts every week, like really good album cover designs. And so it's kind of, it's more for graphic designers, like fans of fine art, than it would be for music fans. And to me, that's something I would pursue, because it's like, you want the respect of those people, kind of thing.
Yep, that's what I mean. I feel like the term kind of gives a negative idea, but those kind of things are super cool. And especially, again, like if you apply that same theory of how you use the internet, right, and how you use your socials, that's an account you follow that you enjoy, right?
Yes.
So, I want to get my stuff on there because that's something that I've looked at a bunch, I go back to that page all the time. Like, yes, there you go. The logic fits, like that makes sense. So for me, it's the same thing. It's like, if I just hear, you always working records, sometimes you're inevitably going to have some super popular person is going to like the music, right? Like I've got, plenty of cases I can give you, but like there's almost always someone popular, whether it's an influencer type or it's like a celebrity or something.
Sure.
There's always someone who can every now and then will bite on a record I'm working. And it's like, I feel like in the past, bands are always quick to be like, "Oh my god, we gotta send them something. Oh my god, they gotta post about this, that, and the other." And it's like, no, dude, just let it exist.
It's
like,
not going to work that right.
Well, like if they're already into your music, just like say hi, say thank you, and then let it go, and let them be a fan of yours. And like I'm seeing the proof of that in a few campaigns now. But like, artists who have big celebrity followings and they're posting about the music on their own. Nobody has to ask them to do it. No one has to pay them to do it.
Yeah.
They're just like genuinely excited. You got to be tactful. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You got to be smart about this stuff because fans are smart, dude. They don't want to feel like they're being marketed to. And like, someone who follows just like an Instagram influencer or something, and all of a sudden they see they're posting about some record, they know exactly what's going on there.
That's true. That's true.
They know exactly,
and it's going to say paid partnership in the top right corner.
I was going to say it says something like that, or it's like in the hashtags, it says like hashtag ad. Like they know what they're looking at.
Yeah,
you're not going to get them to list your band off of that. Like it's just not going to. But the example you gave is a totally different story where it's like, that's genuinely like, that makes sense, like, especially if you have a record with really interesting artwork or something, it's like, yeah, this makes sense to go for because the people looking at it are looking at it for the art's sake, like that's what they're looking for. They're not obsessed with the person posting it and like, it's the whole, we need a separate term, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's true. That's true. Okay, so our labels and our listeners, our DIY artists or whatnot, they're always trying to keep their expenses down. I mean, I think it's really important as any entrepreneur, anybody starting a business. At the same time, the artists and labels that we admire all hire publicists. So if money wasn't an issue, for me personally, I would always hire a publicist. I've worked with a publicist on a couple campaigns and I've loved it. And how do our labels know when it's right to make that decision, to make that investment?
Good question. I mean, I guess if you have the money, it is probably always good to have somebody on deck, but that's almost never the case. So I think, when is the right time? I mean, it's, there's a lot of times where I talk about this with some friends of mine all the time where like you find out bands have publicists and managers like right out the gate, no one's heard about them yet. And they've got this sexy manager and this booking agent and this publicist on it. And it's kind of like, every now and then I get it. You know what I mean? Like every now and then the music's just great from the jump and a team builds around it pretty quickly. I get that. But I think in the general, you probably want to get through the initial launch of a project first on your own, like
right.
Especially as a DIY label, it's like you also want to have the relationships out there that your publicist is going to have. Those are good for you too. So it's like, maybe in the beginning, it's especially if you're working with something super small, maybe start local, start with what's within reach and start making some relationships for yourself and see how far you can get the project on your own. And I know that that's saying like, oh, take on an extra job, but is it really an extra job to ask you to send a few extra emails a week? You know what I mean? Like, it's really not that crazy. Like, and at the end of the day, if this is what you want to do, you could drop $3,000 to $5,000 right in the beginning, which you probably don't have, or you could get out there, put in a little bit more work, emailing and reaching out to people and make some relationships that might help you later and get some coverage going for your artist, get some people listening to your stuff. So it's like, that's what I would say is in the beginning, try to get it as far as you can, and when you get to the point where you're like, all right, I've got X, Y, and Z on my own. That's half the time people reach out to me. It's managers saying, okay, we've gotten this far by ourselves. Here's what we're on our own. We're ready for somebody like you to come. We think that we've hit our peak.
Well, that's a great point. And I feel like if you have spent a campaign or a few years on your own, doing it on your own, then I feel like you really know what you need help with and what to expect more from a publicist.
Yeah, like if you can make relationships with a good chunk of, smaller blogs and like local stuff, then do that. Like you should have that because now they're your people and now they support you, not just the artist. They support what you're building. So now you've got a homie and you can call on them for other stuff later and you don't ever, like that's yours now. Why would you not want that? Right. I feel like that's, a lost thing is like you're the person who started a label all by yourself and you like love this art. You're the one who loves this artist so much that you're willing to invest in them.
Right.
So it's like, get out there and talk to some people about it. And then I think you'll see, pretty quickly, okay, we got through this. We have this kind of collection of small blogs and local people that we've made contact with. But, I've reached out to Pitchfork. I hate using them as the example every time, but I've reached out to whoever, Stereo Gum, like 5 times now. And no one's answering, you'll know when you get to that point of like, all right, I've tried multiple times with this place. It's not working. I think I need someone else, that's fine. I think that's the move. And then for somebody like a publicist to come in at that point, at least there's something to stand on, it's way easier to pitch stuff when it has a little bit of history versus the zero, starting from nothing and saying, okay, this is going to be the first time anyone writes about this.
Yeah.
This is tough, like.
So if you are hiring a publicist, let's graduate from that. And that was, by the way, that was great advice. I really, that is, I've asked you that question before. We've talked offline, and I've kind of struggled with that myself, is when is the right time? Because not only, I might be working with some releases on my label that are ready for it. And then I have some releases that just are totally not ready for it. So that was a really good answer for me, because I realized that like it's a kind of a graduation, it's like you move into that, you grow into that stage.
Yeah.
If
it's the same with
go
managers
ahead.
and everything else. It's like, you don't need, there's a pressure to have a booking agent on your first record. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
You're not going on and like I said, there's always exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, it's like, you have to you don't need a manager on your first record. What are they managing?
Yeah.
You need to get out there and be a band, be an artist, whatever it is that you do. You need to go out there and do it for a while.
Totally.
You need to learn some stuff.
If you were to hire someone, how do you measure your return on investment? I once paid for a campaign and we got 100,000 streams on one of the album's singles from Spotify. I think they helped us get on some sort of great playlist. And that was a really objective way to measure our return, because it was like literally the 100,000 streams earned what the campaign cost. But like, I imagine it's not always that easy for a label to objectively know if a campaign was worth it. How do labels or artists, in your experience, measure their return on investment when it comes to hiring a publicist?
I mean, shit, you're going to have to talk to me.
Okay.
You'll have to, labels, I'm just starting to talk to a few labels about innovating the way they look at PR. I'll tell you that. Because I think for the most part, the labels that I work with definitely view success to them is when I send that feedback report every month and it's just loaded with stuff. You know what I mean? That all they're looking for is like the big name outlets and quantity, like just a lot of people covering it.
Right.
Well, that's fair, but I just, I think that it doesn't take into account a bigger picture of, I can get all the blog write-ups you want, bro, but if real people aren't listening to this, you're still in the same place you started with. You just have a lot of press quotes to use.
Right.
So it's a tricky question, but I think I would hope that as, people progress into, whatever's coming next, I think the slowdown of touring has made a lot of people have to second guess. A lot of labels who relied on bands to go on the road to sell their records, relied on that stuff, is like, they're all now being like, uh-oh. like we have potentially a whole year ahead of us of not being able to make that kind of revenue. So what are we doing? And they're all kind of re-examining PR, So I think hopefully it gets, it improves from here.
Well,
but
I've had a thought actually while you were talking that made me realize why that was a stupid question, because I think what I realized is what you were talking about earlier is the way that you discover new music is like 5 random pieces of like little pokes. And it's the same for me. That's exactly the same as a writer I respect, a friend that I know, a blog that I follow, and then one other weird little thing of fate or something. And so I feel like for you, what if you, as a publicist, got one of those things or 2 of those things, but you didn't get all 5? If you so you really, it's so hard to measure that, because I'm getting it from the work that you're doing on some of your records, but then I'll also follow some other music lovers who are tweeting about the record. So all of a sudden it all adds up, and then I finally become a fan. It's so hard to measure.
No, it really is. And I think that the goal is to always have everything kind of popping off at once, but that's never the case. Every now and then you get a campaign where you're like, oh shit, everything, I'm firing on all cylinders right now. Everything's going. But that's, not, you can't go into it. You can go into it trying to get that every time, but you very quickly, within the first few weeks of being out there and pitching, you find out pretty quickly that, is this going to be one of those records or not? And most of the time it's not. And that doesn't mean that you failed, I think that's important to realize too. I think bands and artists and labels, they all kind of see this like, we've got to go big or there nothing happened. We have to be just like that other artist or we failed.
Right.
And a lot of times, you get lucky and everybody lines up to support a band right out the gate. And other times you don't. And it's a build and you have to work slow and hard. And I think it's important in the very beginning, both when labels are thinking about who they're going to sign and when publicists are thinking about who they're going to work with and vice versa, like all that kind of stuff. It's very important in those early conversations before you decide anything to have those kinds of conversations of, hey, it would be dope if right out the gate this popped off. We would all love that. But more than likely, we're going to have to work it for a while. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that build is going to look like. And let's talk about what success means at different levels,
right.
Because just because you didn't go all the way to the moon doesn't mean you didn't get far, And for me, I also, every record I work, I tell people, as long as by the end of this project, when we're done working together, you feel like you've either learned something or you've made it somewhere a little further than you started. I don't know if that means you're going to get all the sexy press, write-ups. I don't know. I got to see what's up. But working with me, you will at the end of it feel like you're further ahead than you started. I can guarantee it.
And that's all really somebody should ever expect. And it's so hard for an artist because we all have these illusions that our next record or our first record is going to be the one that breaks us and that we can live off for the rest of our lives. But it's really, you really even, not even just about an album campaign, but an album itself should just feel like a mile marker and not, the entire destination.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then most of the time that's probably going to be the case, and that's okay. Like, so if you want to be around for a while, that should be what you're looking for. Exactly. The quick kind of everything out the gate is, there are certain cases where it makes total sense, especially in more of a pop kind of centric and hip hop centric kind of field. But in general, it's like you want to build it. You want it so that when you are finally getting all of that attention, you can fill 1,000 cap room on your own. You didn't need all those people to support you. You did it by yourself. Like, create more value for yourself and for your artists if you just don't rush everything and just look at it. Hey, on this record, we got X, Y, and Z more than we did on the last time around. Or, hey, we got in touch with this person and that was one of our goals in the beginning, so we did great. It's definitely coming back down to earth a little bit. Yeah. It's easy, I think, online to, we're always comparing ourselves to each other. We're always, whether it's on a personal level or on a professional level, we all have imposter syndrome to some extent. And so we're all looking at each other being like, oh my God, but that band did they got this, that, and the other. I should be on that. Like, it gets in people's heads so easily and it feels so natural. But if you're making any kind of moves and you're turning new people into your music, you're winning. Like, you're doing that's the right. That's the idea. But if it's not so huge, it kind of throws people off and makes them feel like they're not succeeding. And it's, hopefully, over time people understand, and they can kind of see the bigger picture, especially through resources like yours and stuff, where they understand like success can be a varying level of stuff. Obviously it's dope. All the pieces fall into place, but they're not always going to. So
let me ask you about yourself. We're talking that was a 35-minute cold open, but we're talking with Jamie Coletta of No Earbuds. Tell me about you. Like, how did you get into this? Everyone's like, what have I listened to?
Like, who is this monster?
No, I don't know this. I don't know the answer to this, but how did you get into being a publicist?
It was kind of just happened. When I was in college, I was just a music business major, and we had to do internships, and a friend of mine had just finished her internship at Capitol Records, and she said, I'll put your name in, I'll let them know that you need an internship, and I went in and I met them, and it was the publicity department, and that's just where I landed. It's just sort of like, I think the truth is I think I was probably going to figure that out at some point, but it's not like I was in college being like, I'm going to be a publicist. This was never the game. That was never what I thought. All I wanted was to work with the bands I liked and to like listen and have my days filled with telling other people about it. I didn't know that was a gig. I didn't know that that's what it was, So
were you already doing that, like in high school or in college? Were you
for sure. Like music was definitely like in high school, I was definitely like always had my headphones in and people, what are you listening to? And I would always share, always pop an earbud out and let them have one.
Yeah.
And like, it was just there. Yeah, I was definitely always that person in high school and in college, booking shows and like really like getting involved with bands that I, were either local or smallish enough that I could, get involved with street teams, all that kind of shit. Like I was definitely.
I love street teams. You get free stuff.
But exactly. Back then, that's all it was, right? Yeah. I just wanted posters. But, it was definitely like it was a part of me. I was always listening to stuff, making mix CDs like left and right. Oh my God, I wish I still had them. But, that was my gig. I was making playlists before we were making playlists, like that was what I was all about for sure. And then that's, I did the music business program because I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And then I still didn't really, the program at that time was still pretty new and it wasn't really fleshed out in terms of like, what kind of field do you want to pursue? It was very broad strokes kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I didn't even really through classes, didn't really even figure out what I wanted. It was that internship where it was like, okay, I get this. And then it was like, I just sort of continued down that path. Everything I did after that, my experience pointed to publicity. So I just kept doing it,
Sorry, you said you worked at Capitol?
Yeah, that was
in LA?
No, I went to college in Connecticut. And I did an internship in New York.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm also leaving out. There was an indie publicist who was based in Connecticut that I worked for a while. He was actually really cool. He repped like the 1 a.m. radio and These Arms Are Snakes and like just some kind of cool like punk shit. And like that was, I started with him and then I did the Capitol one.
And was the Capitol like big releases? Like were you starstruck ever or were
I've never really had that like starstruck feeling happen to me. Like, I feel like when I see a famous person or like I'm working on something I see them as like a person. I don't know. Like there's a hint of it that I get like, oh shit, that's what's up. Like that's whoever, like I remember I was working at the red carpet at the Grammys one time and Sheryl Crow walked by and I was like, oh shit, that's Sheryl Crow. Like you get like a little teensy bit, but then it goes away pretty fast. So I don't think I like truly starstruck, but yeah, I can't recall. I mean, we worked on, that was right when Katy Perry was breaking. So that was
okay.
One of my supervisors was her publicist. And like, it was really, really cool to see sort of them, take her from this like, singer-songwriter who was down at South by Southwest and like then blow her into this whole other stratosphere. I think when I was there, it was right around when I Kissed a Girl was happening. So it was really just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
That was rad.
Did you learn, the things you learned there, are you able to translate those into the indie rock world?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, the entire earliest part of my career was all working with major label stuff. And I truly believe, and that's what makes me different than everybody else. Like I take the knowledge and the experience of working with big, huge stars, and I take what I can from that and I bring it to bands that play in garages. I know how to brand someone, I know what it means to have a strong brand and how to really have a relatable identity for people. And I think that's what pop artists do really well, is that they've just got something about them. They've got that thing,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
I think that bands can have that too. And it's just a little bit of crafting in the beginning to help, create that out there and really like get that image in people's heads. In the very beginning of working with anyone, that's really all I'm doing is I'm figuring out who is this band and what's their vibe and how can I make sure that gets through in everything, know? So as people discover them, that message is coming out loud and clear, That's all major label pop stuff. That's like pop branding type stuff, I think.
Do you ever get pushback from bands who say, oh, no, I just want to be punk rock. I just want to be authentic. I don't want to, like they're kind of turned off by seeing how the sausage is made?
No, because literally, like, they are being authentic. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's the idea, like that. I would never tell an artist to not be who they are. It's more about taking who they are and finding the right way to message that to people.
Sure.
You know, like
Yeah.
you could be a snotty punk band, but like you're the best snotty punk band there is. You are the snottiest of snotty punk band. You know what I mean? Like that is what it is. So it's just, you know.
Yeah. No, that's great.
It's got to be authentic. You know, I'm never here to, you know, to alter or change, you know, what your presentation is to the world. It's about taking who you are naturally and finding interesting and cool ways to share that with more people. Because you think you're weird and you think you're the only one. You're not. You're not. You know, there are so many people out there who think you're the coolest thing in the world, you know? So it's like just being yourself and then finding strategic ways to get that out in front of more people. That's the game, you know?
I really like that approach because I really do think that it's not fair that all the crappy music has the best marketing. You know what I mean? So for if there is a way for incredible marketing to be put to work on really obscure music or weird music or instrumental music or experimental music, I think that's really cool. I think it's our turn to do that. I think that's really awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. That's my main idea with everything I work on. Is just like, how can we do big, cool shit? You know? Like, you got to think, especially now, it's like you have to think big. You have to step outside the box a little bit.
How do you pick a publicist? Where do you start as a label?
Probably starts with like if you really don't know any of them, if you don't know anyone, look to the artists that you like, look to campaigns that you think are done well, and find out who works those records. You know, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Just look at artists who you think, or if you're looking at your artist and you're saying, you know, okay, I want my artist to kind of follow in the similar trajectory as X, Y, and Z. Well, then who does PR for X, Y, and Z? That's it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll go and, they say, no, I'm not into it. Then ask them for suggestions, Yeah. Then say, if you're not into it, that's cool. Do you have any friends or anyone that you think might like this, and get a recommendation from somebody that you admire like that.
Yeah.
That's how and then over time, you'll just know the people, you'll just know who's out there and stuff, and you'll reach out to who you think is the right fit.
That's not unlike how a lot of artists do things with finding a record producer or a mixing engineer. Right, exactly. Yeah. Or a graphic designer.
Yeah. Just look at the stuff you like and then try to find out who works the record, and then start there.
So one of the things, if a label has hired a publicist, what then is the label's role during the campaign? I mean, they shouldn't just put their feet up. There's this incredible opportunity, I think, to have more hands on deck and double the promo effort. So what should the role of the record label be after you've hired a publicist?
Stay on top of them, check in with them, make sure they feel appreciated. Don't breathe down their neck. Just like have a good relationship with them and trust them. And, don't bark orders. Don't get mad if they haven't gotten you X, Y, and Z. Like, just have it be a strategic partnership. View it like that versus I hired you. You're supposed to work for, you're supposed to
get yeah.
Like, have it be like, yeah, I'm spending money on you because I believe in you and I believe in your strategy. I understand it may not always work and then we have to start over, but you're the person. You know what I mean? Like, think about them like that. And I think that's how you get the best out of them, is when they feel appreciated and like they have a partner versus like a barking boss.
Yeah.
Like,
that's so cool.
I've worked plenty of times where whether the band or a label, like they get bratty when they don't get certain stuff, and it's like, you know what, go get it yourself. Like, this is not what you brought me in for. You don't bark orders at me. I bring you opportunities, and I'm your voice out there. Like, you probably want to keep me happy. Like, you want me to feel good, like, if obviously there's certain times where serious conversations need to happen, but it's 9 times out of 10, a publicist is probably busting their ass for you. So make sure they feel appreciated. And I think that totally. Respect goes a really long way.
I had this epiphany when I hired a publicist about 6 years into running a label. And I had been doing my own promo for so long. And then when I hired this publicist and they were doing all the things that I was normally having to do, I remember thinking, now what? Like, I have all this free time. I could do all the extra things that I wouldn't normally have time for. and creating social media content, maybe filming some behind the scenes stuff, or maybe reaching out to my own contacts. So I just had this huge epiphany that's like, we can actually like double the value of a publicist because it frees up my time.
Oh my God. And you just brought up a whole other thing where it's like, what can you do to, help your publicist or whatever and make him work, make it better? Wrangle your band and get shit going. You know what I mean? Like, don't just wait. Don't just hire somebody and then just sit around and wait for stuff to come in. Be constant. Be like, okay, now they're handling that part of this. I'm going to, work on, like you said, work on the content. I'm going to make sure we have a video. I'm going to check on this. I'm going to, get other shit going.
Yeah.
Stay on top of the band and make sure they're doing stuff, because that, you can't just hire somebody, sit back and wait for stuff to come in. Like, you'll get stuff that's going to happen, but it'll run dry quick. Like, you'll get your initial blast of stuff, but if you're not feeding that system too, it's just going to run out, and that somebody you just hired to get you a few blogs. That's it. Instead of being kind of an equal partner in the fight and building into something bigger,
How important is lead time? I mean, we've gone through this a lot. You and I have talked about this, but we've gone through this a lot too on the show. Giving yourself and your campaign time, how important is that when it comes to promoting an album?
I mean, super important. I think in terms of just like, if you wait to the last second, I mean, think about it like this: like, how long did you spend making that record? How long did you spend getting the artwork ready and getting X, Y, and Z and doing all this other stuff? Well, and then to rush it out in like a month, and then expect somebody that you hire or a label, expect someone to be able to just spin gold out of it. Like, it's just not going to happen. Well, you have to. You don't need as much lead time as it takes to make the record, but you need to think about it like that. Like, especially, I've had bands hit me up with a music video and they're like, hey, it needs to come out at the end of the month. And I'm like, then put it out yourself, because you really want to make some noise with it. How long did it take you to make and edit this video? Give me some time too. Like, everybody needs a little bit of window.
This is your art form.
Yeah. Like, do you want people to hear, this is what I need, the same amount of time that you spend. And I need that level of like patience from you. And if you don't have it, then just put it out yourself, then your goals are off from what you really think they are.
That's such a great point, because it's not absurd to take a year or more to write a record and a year or more to record and mix a record. And then to be like, okay, can we get everything together in a couple of weeks for the release? Like, that's absurd. That's a really good point to think of the publicity side of things, like, as just an equal partner to the recording and writing, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to spend a year on it, but in some cases you do. I don't know. Like, some cases, if you're on board with a project from an early point, it does sometimes take a while to build, but I would say the minimum you should be looking at like 4 months, you should be, right now, you should be already planning out what January and February and March are going to look like. And you should be talking to the Publicist, and granted, I don't know when people are going to listen to this.
It could be January, February,
real quick.
or
I
March.
was like, oh, wait. But the point is like 4 to 5 months out, you should be talking about who you're going to, at least if you're going to bring in publicists, you should be talking to them already. If you don't have music at 4 to 5 months out, then you shouldn't be putting the record out yet. Wait till you have the music, have a general idea, but wait till you have the music in your hand before you go and start setting everything up, because it's just not ready yet. So I think, minimum 4 months is super important for people to be able to actually do some real work. And actually listen to the record too. That's important. Like, you give me 2 months to work on something, I'm probably going to listen to it twice, I'm going to listen to it the amount of times I need to be able to do my job. I'm not going to really get in there, and I'm not going to learn a lot, so your results kind of, you want to rush the process. Sometimes it has to happen. Okay. Well, you're not going to get the same kind of,
I can quantifiably prove the albums that I've given the most amount of lead time for press purposes have had more coverage than the albums that I just quickly sent them an email 2 weeks ahead of time. Like, easily the best coverage I've ever received. Bandcamp Daily, Bandcamp Weekly, all the cool features from them. That's all 2 to 3 months ahead of time. Spotify, iTunes, those guys have always been very kind if they have the time. So yes, that's really true when I look back.
No, yeah, me too. Honestly, yeah, the longer I'm on a project, the more success I'll have with it. It's very, it's. I understand a lot of indie labels and DIY labels can't afford to have a publicist just always on a project, but if I know from the point of hearing the record that I'm working it, even though it's not coming out for 6 months, it's in my radar. I'm locked in. I'm going to work on it. Well, then when people want to know what I'm working on, that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And it's also the fact that I have extra time to listen to it and more time to be excited about it.
Yeah.
Like, you give me more time with it, that's the more time I have to love it, So
That's
it's like,
right.
but we're actually promoting it, I know this record inside and out, that would be the best of, that's the way you want it to go.
I find even just like optically, it makes you look like you're serious. It makes your label look more intentional, more professional, makes the artist look more professional when you have your press kit and you even have the vinyl box downstairs everything's all ready and you're still 2 months out. To me, it just makes you look more put together.
Yeah, and it's probably less stressful, honestly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
There's almost never a reason to rush this stuff. This is just music,
Yeah.
This is not like the, so time sensitive type stuff. It's just like, you don't need to rush it. If you don't have everything in hand, then you're not ready to put a release date on the calendar yet. So
that's right. Yeah. Here's a question I've always wondered. We talked about this before I hit record, and I'm kind of curious because it's a serious question. But like any freelancer, a publicist who runs their own business often can't afford to turn down clients. But what if the music sucks and the client's willing to pay? So I'm always curious, like, is a publicist just going to take my work and take my money, even if they don't deep down see any hope of it getting covered? How does that work?
I mean, I won't, but I think
good. That's good.
Plenty of people will,
right.
I can't tell you. I don't know how to tell which one, like that's an unfortunate part of this thing is like, that's why it's like, if you factor in everything we're talking about, if you reach out to somebody far enough in advance, they have enough time to listen to the record and really consider it. Like, you've really got to also use your gut too. Like, a lot of times a post will be like, yeah, I'll do this, but you'll know sort of from talking to them that they're not really engaged with it. Like, you kind of have to use your best judgment a little bit. But it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I kind of have a pretty strict, if I don't like it, I'm not working on it kind of policy. It doesn't matter if it's has potential. It doesn't matter if it's, could be huge and already is huge. It's like, if I don't bite, I don't bite, know? The idea is that I have to go out there and act and be the advocate for this to other people. If I don't like it, it's not happening,
totally.
There's plenty of people who would just do it, who just take the business. And, especially in bigger firms, I think you run into that a little bit more often because you've got, the person who, there's a lot of junior publicists, there's people who need to learn and, things like that. And when I was first starting out, I worked a bunch of stuff I didn't like, a bunch of it. Pretty much everything I worked on in the beginning, I didn't like.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, but I think you can probably avoid that happening once you start to get to know your community a little better and like who the players are in it. You'll get to know who the publicists are in it that are like the individual people who, hopefully they're smart enough to use their social media to sort of put it out there, what kind of stuff they're into, so that if you do that research and you can pinpoint that person who you think will really get it, and then you reach out to them early enough so that they can listen to it and it's not rushed, et cetera, et cetera. It all kind of builds into the same answer. All of it is important. You got to do all of it. It's important to, take each step, and that's how you'll find the person who won't do that to you, you know? But if you're just go and you say, oh, this big name PR firm, they said that they would be interested in working the record for this much money, let's do it. Go into that knowing you might get tossed to an intern, might get tossed to a junior, and it might be. Or even if you're not, it could just be the type of place that's just more about quantity than anything else. And they just got to move.
Right.
And as long as they get you a few pieces here and there and send the emails out, they've done their job, So it's a lot on you as the person hiring to do that research and to really like trust your gut and make sure that who you're reaching out to has enough time to listen. And if you don't feel like they love it, that's your call. If you want to still hire them because they have got a big firm behind them or whatever, like you got to go into it knowing that might happen.
This goes back to lead time because, and you've talked about, doing this, doing your research ahead of schedule, but like for me personally, just based on how slow I move and how much I want to think about things, some of my own projects, I like to have nearing completion or entering the mastering stage like a year in advance, because I want to take this time to think, should I send this to a label? Should I send this to a publicist? I want to think about the merch. I want to think about how we do videos to support it.
Mhm.
And I know a couple labels, and we're talking with a big label in a couple weeks about a big release, and who the artist will hand in the record about 10 to 12 months before the release date. And
Wow.
I just
Yeah.
feel like that's, that's just, I mean, that's maybe not entirely possible, but the research that you're talking about can happen while mixing is happening or while recording is
Yeah.
happening. You could be talking about
Mhm.
artwork and stuff like that, or researching your publicist.
Yeah, as long as you have some kind of music to listen to. I know some people don't like sharing demos or whatever, but if you've got like an unmixed or like a mixed but not mastered version of a record, you should already have that in the inboxes of who you want to work on that record.
Wow, interesting.
That feels, as long as the artist is comfortable with it. But I
Yeah.
feel like if it's close to being done and it's not completely finished, like at least start those conversations, because then at least I get to hear. It's actually really cool to be able to hear the music start from one place and kind of see where it ends up. It's like, we don't have to start working together at that point, but at least I can put that space in my calendar if I think the record sounds cool, or if I back the artist enough and I really want to do the project. Well, all I need to know is, I kind of back, I've heard a piece of the music, it sounds great, and I'm putting it in my calendar, and just keep me posted when you have the finished product, I think that's the move, because then you can kind of, first off, people are booking out. I book out probably 4 to 6 months out.
Wow.
So it's like, if you're hitting me up for a release, 4 months from now, I might not be able to do it. Like,
wow.
It just depends. So people definitely fill their calendars like that, because if you've got something coming and you want someone to work on it, then sometimes it's smart to just hit them up as soon as you know that, and just say, hey, this is, especially if it's a well-known artist and it's not a new thing, you can say, oh yeah, we want to work with you on this. We'll send you the music as soon as it's ready, whatever. Then I can at least kind of put it in my calendar and hold it and know I'm getting that music at some point. You know what I mean? Or that's something I'm going to work on later. So, I think that's super important.
This has been great. I think this whole conversation, for me, I've learned a lot, and I think that I think it's really helpful. I think if you're a label and you're going to do things on your own, this is helpful. If you're looking to hire a publicist, I think this is helpful. We'll hear from people, I'm sure, but I just this has been so great. Thank you for doing this. It's been tons of fun. I wanted to let our listeners know about something super exciting that Other Record Labels has been developing a course for indie record labels. This has been something in the works for many, many months now, but it focuses mainly on the topic of marketing and promoting your releases, kind of what we're talking about today. Jamie teaches a module in it, which is incredibly insightful, and this is a huge preview in a way, but
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
On how to build your own release campaign from scratch. I'm super excited for everyone to hear it. This course is coming out next week if you're listening to this in real time. Otherwise, you can go to otherrecordlabels.com to find out more. The module that you do is very in depth, and it's like a how-to on how to make a DIY press campaign. Inevitably, like we talked about, a lot of small labels have to manage their own campaigns, at least in the early years. Just kind of overarching, what advice do you have for us who can't yet budget a publicist, and so we're kind of embarking on doing it ourselves?
Figure out who your people are. Take time, use your social media, and identify who your community is, and who the writers are, and the publicists, and the podcast. Find out who are the people that like the kind of stuff that you do. That's something you can do in your free time when you're just sitting on the couch on your social media anyway. Just dig around and figure out who your community is, and participate in it, be a part of it. Make yourself one of those people. As a label, you can have social media and you can interact with people, and you have cement yourself in that scene that you want to be a part of, and do that on your own. And that can already get you some help, and then when once you know your people and you know your community, you can reach out to them on your own, and you can try to get them listening to your stuff, or just aware that you exist, that's huge. And just if you can't afford to bring in somebody yet, first off, there's plenty of people you can hire that do really low budget campaigns. They're not the best in the game, but they're good. They're good at what they do. If you really want to go that route, they're out there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would say take it into your own hands and, build your community out and start reaching out to, just start it. Just start cold hitting people up and just introduce yourself. If you really started this as a thing that, if you really started a label and you genuinely care and you're passionate about what you're doing, then you're going to want to tell people about it.
Yeah.
So do that. You don't, if you can't afford someone to do it for you, do it yourself. And when you finally feel like you've hit that breaking point, that's when you can hire somebody. But start reaching out to people left and right and introduce yourself and tell them what you're doing and why you think they'd like it, and just go that route. And you're going to eventually start picking up some people, no question.
In the course, you talk about creating timelines and building social media plan, but you talk about content inventory, which I thought was super smart. I love that idea to just kind of, and for, you said a couple seconds ago, sit back and determine who your audience is, determine who your team is. But this idea of content inventory, I think is kind of cool. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. It's just like a phrase I came up with.
Okay.
It basically just means like, you know what you have to work with before you start planning stuff out. Like, do an inventory of, okay, I've got one music video, I've got 2 lyric videos, I'm going to have these photos, this, that, and the other. Like, look at what you have to be beside. You have obviously singles, they count as content, but beyond just the music, what else do you have to work with? And if, once you can do that inventory, you'll see what you have, and then you can then you plot it out, and then you can build the timeline, and then you can start figuring out how you want each thing to be used. But it's important to do that early, because sometimes you'll do that and you'll be like, fuck, we only got like 2 things, we don't have a lot. You'll realize pretty quickly, like, if you need to make more stuff and come up with more stuff, or if you've got plenty that'll carry, I've got a couple of records right now where when we sit down and when we do that, it's like, okay, we've got the next year figured out. Like, and you don't have to have it all ready yet. It doesn't mean that it's done. It means that I know what's coming. This is the piece that we're creating for this, and this is what we're doing for that. And you can kind of see the road ahead of you a little bit. And that's when, once you know what you've got, then you can kind of plot out strategically, what's the right way to go about this? What order should I do these things in? What's the purpose of putting this out at this time? And you can really kind of plot the campaign from there. But just the idea of like sitting down and consciously typing out or writing out what you have to work with before you start working, especially if you're going to reach out to publicists, have that ready for them and say, here's what we have coming up. Here's what's in our pocket, and we're there for you to play with. You know what I mean? Like, this is what you're going to have to work with. Like, do that early and like know what you're going to have. And, it'll either tell you that you've got plenty and it's time to start strategizing how it comes out, or it'll tell you need to work a little harder.
That's great. Jamie, you're a genius. Thank you for doing this episode.
Well, I am not, but I appreciate that very much. And thank you so much for having me. I love what you've built here. And if anybody has any other questions or wants to talk to me about stuff, I'm pretty easy to find online.
Yes.
Just hit me up, knowearbuds.com. And thanks for having me.
Thank you all for listening. You can find out more about Jamie and her incredible work, and you can hire her at knowearbuds.com. I hope you found this interview helpful. Speaking of helpful, make sure you're signed up to our mailing list, which you can hop on at otherrecordlabels.com. The special announcement that I wanted to share with you today is launching next week. And if you're listening to this in real time, then it's next week. It's September 29th when we're launching an online course. This is a course that we've built. It actually includes a module with Jamie. And she teaches a module on how to build a release plan from scratch. It is so good. It is so valuable. I can't get into all the details. I'm going to give you everything next week on our email list, as well as a special episode on the show. But we're launching an online course. There's so many questions that have poured in. I've connected with a lot of you guys over the past year or two, and I've been doing surveys, and I've been DMing with you and asking you certain questions, and the questions that I've been getting have all been hovering around the topic of marketing and marketing for indie record labels, how to promote your releases, how to promote a release after release date, how to build a workback schedule and a release plan. These are all things that we decided to tackle in this course. It comes out next week. I'm so excited for you to check it out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a subscriber. Have a great week.